Silence composes the nerves, and as an unbroken hush now reigned again through the whole house, I began to feel the return of slumber, but it was not fated that I should sleep that night. A dream had scarcely approached my ear when it fled affrighted, scared by a marrow-freezing incident enough. This was a demonic laugh, low, suppressed, and deep, uttered, as it seemed, at the very keyhole of my chamber door. The head of my bed was near the door, and I thought at first the goblin laughter stood at my bedside, or rather crouched by my pillow, but I rose, looked around, and could see nothing, while, as I still gazed, the unnatural sound was reiterated, and I knew it came from behind the panels. My first impulse was to rise and fasten the bolt, my next again to cry out, "Who is there?" Something gurgled and moaned. Ere long, something retreated up the gallery toward the third-story staircase. A door had lately been made to shut in that staircase. I heard it open and close, and all was still.
Hello everyone, Adrienne here. So I know it's been a while since last I posted a Gothic literature review, but here we are to change that today. Things have been a little nuts, let's just put it that way. I know I keep saying that, but I don't want to get into it, I just want to have some fun. I guess today was the perfect day to film this review because in case the microphone picks up the treacherous rain and wind out there, I suppose the atmosphere is set to do a Gothic literature review. Anyway, I've been getting things organized after Kenny and I got married 2 months ago. For example, the stress and headache of getting my maiden name changed to my married name on all of my official paperwork, so thank you for your patience and understanding. So, without further ado, I would like to talk about one of my favorites of the well-known Gothic novels, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Written in 1848, Jane Eyre became one of the most popular novels of the 19th century. There are lots of novels and stories that were inspired by it, Crimson Peak for one, and the original Dark Shadows series, and many, many others. It was a commentary on the social roles of men and women in the early Victorian society, as well as a significant installment of the Gothic genre. I know there's a general consensus that people tend to prefer Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte over Jane Eyre, but on that I tend to kind of disagree. When I tried rereading Wuthering Heights within the last 5 years, I ended up putting it down and moved on to something else. Mind you, I did read it when I was in junior high or high school, but not since. In comparison to Jane Eyre, I find it rather dense, and I'm not as fond of the format of storytelling, and I had that really irritating feeling of get to the part where something happens with Wuthering Heights. I just, in general, prefer Jane Eyre, but I will get into that after I tell you a bit more about the story itself. Jane Eyre is told from the perspective of the title character from childhood to young woman of a life filled with sorrow, desolation, mystery, terror, romance, heartbreak, and eventually redemption. Jane is orphaned at a young age and taken in by her wealthy uncle, Mr. Reed, but after his death, his wife, Mrs. Reed, betrays her late husband's wishes by allowing Jane to be terrorized by her own children. Mrs. Reed also delights in oppressing Jane, making her feel alienated and unwanted by telling her what a wicked child she is. One of the most cruel punishments that they dish out to her is locking her in the Red Room, which is apparently the room where her uncle, Mr. Reed, passed away and where his ghost still claims dominion. You can imagine how both terrifying and cruel this is. It's a bitter reminder of the man that made his wife promise to take care of you, and the ever-looming reality that this man's absence, so to speak, is the reason for the cruelty that you are dealt from your aunt and your cousins. Like, that's just really sad. Can you just imagine that? I certainly can't. So it's easy to see how Jane finds going to a religious boarding school for girls called Lowood at age 10 favorable to living with Mrs. Reed, even under the oversight of the hypocritical and zealous Mr. Brocklehurst. Jane makes friends at school with the kind and persecuted Helen Burns, and makes an enemy in the tyrannical Mr. Brocklehurst. Poor Helen passes away from tuberculosis after a typhus epidemic that breaks out at the school. This epidemic results in the investigation and the removal of Mr. Brocklehurst to make room for kinder headmasters. Jane teaches at Lowood for 2 years after attending for 6. Jane accepts a position as a governess for a young French girl at Thornfield, but little did she expect to fall in love with the brooding, ill-tempered, yet passionate master of the manor, Mr. Rochester. He seems to be amused and pleased, at the same time, it's really weird, by Jane's intellect and her ability to speak her mind, yet sometimes seems threatened by it. That's a little weird. It really is. Amidst getting accustomed to her new surroundings, strange occurrences disturb the atmosphere at Thornfield. Mr. Rochester's bed mysteriously catches aflame in the middle of the night, with Jane as his rescuer. Sometime later, Jane attends to a stabbing victim who is coerced to tell her nothing of how he got the near-fatal gash and trembles of terror. That's pretty intense. Even after Mr. Rochester dangles a beautiful, wealthy, yet cruel young woman as a potential bride in front of her, Jane still loves him, which is why it's so unbelievable when he suddenly proposes. I mean, I'd be a little taken aback myself. Yet, something sinister is afoot that seeks to disrupt the strange union. What on earth could that be? I'll let you find out. This is a review after all, not a summary. I still want you to read it and find out for yourself. What I like about Jane Eyre as a story is how immersive it is. We're experiencing Jane's story from her perspective, which makes the storytelling method far more compelling than, say, like an omniscient or third-party orator telling the story, as in Wuthering Heights. And because Jane Eyre is told in a linear fashion, it's a lot easier to follow than Wuthering Heights, in my opinion. That just seemed to feature a lot of jumping around, and I didn't really dig it that much. Jane is an outsider, an outcast even, hoping to love and be loved, and I think that's a feeling that nearly everyone out there can identify with, particularly those within the goth subculture who come across this book as well. Hell, I think a lot of goths out there might even identify with Jane and how she suffered from bullying, and how she kind of got a little bit of that weird religious oppression thing happening. I know a lot of goths kind of grew up with that. It's a little weird. Actually, it's really weird. But it's amazing how a story written more than a century and a half ago can be relevant still today. Mr. Rochester definitely has some favorable qualities. Like, I was kind of a big fan of the descriptions of his singing voice and his ability on the piano, but he's kind of a dick, kind of a cad, kind of a bounder. But I will leave it to you, the readers, to decide if his past and experiences made him that way justifiably. You know, you never know what someone is going through, and, you know, sometimes you need to take a step back and think about things, kind of put things in perspective. But that's just me. Let's just say that I think he pulls a couple of really nasty tricks on Jane to get her to profess her feelings for him. This was 600 pages, like this book as a whole, so it'll be a bit of a long read, but I think nevertheless it'll be much enjoyed. Because of the style of storytelling, you will hardly notice the passing of the pages and just really get immersed in it. I find that even if a book is super long, sometimes, like, some people will be like, oh my god, it's 600 pages, how can I do this? But if you have the right person telling the story in the right way, and it's a really compelling story, you'll just fly through it and not realize it. But I highly, highly, highly recommend it. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I know it's been a little crazy in the past couple of months, but, you know, I'm working through it, trying to make sense of everything. Things are calming down a lot. So, again, I really appreciate it. And I also wanted to give a shout out to my latest patron, who is Von Cobra. Thank you so much for joining my little legion of patrons. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your support. And thank you to all of my patrons for your support. Like, I cannot tell you how big of a help it is. Like, thank you. Thank you so much. And to everyone, thank you so much for watching, and make sure you subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and make sure you hit the bell for notifications for more videos on Gothic literature, Gothic music reviews, as well as absinthe reviews, and some fun miscellaneous stuff that may happen here and there. You guys are amazing, I love you, and I will see you guys later. Bye!